Before rock became a brand, before fame turned into a product, there was a band that defined excess, innovation, and mystery. They didn't just make songs, they built temples of sound. But behind the myth of Led Zeppelin lies a truth few dare to tell, a story of genius, obsession, and the price of immortality. What happens when four musicians chase perfection so relentlessly that it nearly destroys them? This isn't just a band's biography, it's a blueprint for how rock became religion and how that religion fell apart. It started quietly in a studio that smelled of dust and ambition. Jimmy Page, a guitarist searching for a new voice. Robert Plant, a vocalist nobody believed could command the world. John Bonham, a drummer who hit like thunder. And John Paul Jones, the architect, holding it all together. Together they would create a sound that would echo through generations, but at a cost none of them could have imagined. As fame exploded, so did the myth, symbols, spells, and stories that blurred truth and legend. Was it magic, madness, or pure musical alchemy? Every riff told a secret, every performance a ritual. But for every god of rock, there's a shadow. Behind the curtains, the cost of greatness was rising. One shattered friendship, one lost night, one heartbeat away from silence. This is the untold story of Bonham, Page, and Plant, three men bound by sound, fame, and fate. Welcome to A to Zeppelin, the Led Zeppelin story, where legend meets the truth behind the noise. In 1966, London was electric. The streets buzzed with the aftershock of the British invasion. The Beatles, the Stones, the Who, each rewriting what rock could sound like. But beneath that polished pop and swinging London glamour, something darker and louder was brewing. On the radio, most songs still played it safe. Catchy choruses, clean guitars, 3-minute hits designed for teenagers with pocket change. Behind closed doors, though, a different crowd was listening to blues imports from Chicago, to Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, to guitar lines that growled instead of smiled. England's working-class youth felt that tension. Factories were closing, rents were rising, and the world felt unstable. The soundtrack of rebellion was waiting for a new architect. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, a quiet, sharp-eyed guitarist named Jimmy Page was in a studio, not a stage. He was London's secret weapon. Barely in his 20s, already one of the most sought-after session musicians in the country. When other players slept, he was stacking takes for Petula Clark, The Kinks, and Donovan, laying down riffs that would never carry his name. He was precise, disciplined, but restless. He wanted sound to feel dangerous again. Hold that sound in your head, now add a little chaos. The Yardbirds were falling apart. They'd started as a blues outfit fronted by Eric Clapton, then reinvented themselves with Jeff Beck, burning through members and ideas until exhaustion set in. When Page joined as bassist, then slid over to lead guitar, the band was already cracking at the edges. By 1968, they were done, tired of the road, of the business of chasing trends. But Page wasn't ready to quit. He had a vision, a heavier band, a tighter rhythm section, something that could fuse the soul of the blues with the power of thunder. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Jimmy Page didn't just want another band. He wanted chemistry. He understood that sound alone wasn't enough. It needed character, danger, and depth. That's when he found Robert Plant, a tall, wild-haired singer from the Midlands, with a voice that could swing from soft prayer to full scream in a heartbeat. Plant wasn't famous, he was raw, but Page heard something in him, a balance of innocence and fury. Plant, in turn, brought along his friend John Bonham, a drummer whose style was pure, controlled violence. Bonham didn't play time, he carved it. His sound was massive, tribal, but precise. And then came John Paul Jones, already a respected session bassist and arranger, the quiet architect who could translate chaos into structure. Quick reality check. While London's pop scene polished their suits for television, these four were rehearsing in damp rooms that shook when Bonham hit the kick drum. Their first session together wasn't just good, it was frightening. Page later said the air felt electric, like something alive had entered the room. The riffs were heavier, the grooves deeper, the energy almost uncontrollable. They weren't chasing radio, they were chasing feeling. By the time anyone knew their names, the parts were already dangerous. Page's precision, Plant's wildness, Bonham's brute power, Jones's quiet control. It was alchemy. They called themselves the New Yardbirds for a brief moment. But that name couldn't contain what they'd become. Someone joked the project would go down like a lead balloon. They tweaked the words, sharpened the edge. Led Zeppelin was born. Here's where it gets interesting. Nobody saw them coming. No label hype. No glossy campaign. Just four musicians walking on stage in Scandinavia, still figuring out what they were together, but already changing the course of rock music forever. And that's where our story begins. At the end of one era and the birth of another, when London's safe pop scene gave way to something heavier, stranger, and louder than anyone expected. In the next chapter, we'll see how those first riffs and the risks they took turned a few late-night sessions into a movement that shook the world. After the Yardbirds collapsed, Jimmy Page stood in the rubble of a band and saw a blank canvas. He wasn't looking to rebuild what had been lost. He wanted to create something no one had heard before. It was 1968. London was buzzing with psychedelia, blues rock, and protest songs, but Page had a sound in his head that didn't fit any of it, something tighter than the jam bands, heavier than the blues acts, but with the same soul burning underneath. He had the blueprint, but he needed the chemistry. Here's how they collided. Through a series of near misses and introductions, Page found Robert Plant, a young singer from the Midlands with long hair, a booming voice, and zero industry status. Plant wasn't famous, but he was fearless. He sang like he was trying to rip open the sky. When they met, it wasn't a business handshake, it was instinct. Page saw in him the raw emotion that his own precision lacked. Plant, in turn, brought along his friend John Bonham, Bonzo. Everyone warned Page that Bonham was too loud, too wild, too stubborn. But when Bonham sat behind the kit, the room tilted. His first hit on the bass drum didn't just fill the room, it owned it. Freeze the frame, listen to that sound one more time. That wasn't a drummer keeping time. That was a man turning rhythm into weaponry. John Paul Jones joined next, a session pro who'd been quietly arranging hits for others. He was the anchor, steady, clever, musical, the piece that turned chaos into a structure. When the four finally plugged in together for the first rehearsal, something happened that even Page couldn't explain. They played Train Kept A-Rollin', a cover from their Yardbirds days. By the time the song ended, everyone in the room just stared at each other. They didn't speak. They just knew. It didn't sound like a new act. It sounded like a machine waking up. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, record executives were still chasing the next Beatles, signing bright pop bands with clean hooks. Nobody in the business asked for a band this heavy, but Peter Grant, their soon-to-be manager, didn't care what the business wanted. He was a mountain of a man with a gangster's confidence, and he swore they would never be another band chewed up by the system. Grant negotiated one of the most radical contracts of the era. Full artistic control, unheard of for a debut band. It meant they would live or die on their own terms. By late 1968, the New Yardbirds had become Led Zeppelin. A joke from Keith Moon, who said the band would go down like a lead balloon, was reborn as a prophecy. They toured Scandinavia, small stages, cold halls, but every night the reaction grew. People didn't just clap, they stared, stunned. Plant's voice tore through the air, Page's guitar screamed like a jet engine, Jones's bass throbbed like machinery, and Bonham's drums hit with the force of thunder. And there, inside that storm, the future of rock was taking shape. Hold that sound in your head. Now add speed. In early 1969, they released Led Zeppelin the Furs. No flashy single, no radio campaign, just raw music, recorded in 30 hours, funded by Page himself. It was blues filtered through distortion and fire. Songs like Good Times, Bad Times, and Dazed and Confused didn't politely ask for attention. They kicked the door open. The kids got it instantly. To them, it sounded like freedom, louder, dirtier, more alive than anything on the charts. But the critics, they hated it. Rolling Stone dismissed it as puffed up blues and unoriginal. And that's where the tension began, fans versus critics. The audience heard the future. The papers heard a problem. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Every night of that first American tour, crowds doubled. Word spread that there was this British band playing the blues louder and faster than anyone had dared. Teenagers packed into small venues just to feel the shockwave of Bonham's drums. Even the sound engineers had to redesign stage rigs to handle the volume. Then came Led Zeppelin 2, released the same year, 1969, but it sounded like a band possessed. From the first riff of Whole Lotta Love, it was clear they'd leveled up. This wasn't imitation blues anymore. This was the birth of a new form. Heavy, mystical, sexual, hypnotic. Freeze the frame. Listen to that opening. The guitar tears in, the drums slam, the vocals moan. It's chaos shaped into art. Led Zeppelin 2 went straight to number 1 in both the US and UK, dethroning the Beatles' Abbey Road. That was the moment the world realized Zeppelin wasn't a passing storm. They were a new climate. And then the backlash landed. Music critics called them unrefined, too loud, too American. But the fans didn't care. The louder the hate, the bigger the crowds. They'd created something the establishment couldn't control, music that didn't ask permission. Peter Grant made sure of that too. No TV appearances, no talk shows, no cheesy interviews. Zeppelin would be myth, not marketing. And that mystery became their power. By 1970, they were unstoppable. From underground clubs to sold-out arenas, in less than 2 years, they had rewritten the playbook. They didn't just ride the wave, they became it. 4 strangers had fused into one unstoppable force. Their rise wasn't luck, it was ignition, and yet buried inside that momentum, something was already shifting. The fame, the pressure, the excess, it was starting to build quietly. Because every legend that rises this fast casts a shadow just as long. In the next chapter, we'll step into that shadow when Led Zeppelin's world got louder, stranger, and more dangerous than anyone imagined. By 1970, Led Zeppelin wasn't just a band anymore, they were an atmosphere. Everywhere they went, they shifted the temperature of a room. Hair got longer, clothes got louder. Parents turned down the volume, and kids turned it right back up. They didn't just sell music, they sold permission. Permission to be wild, to be free, to live outside the rules. And that's why for a generation hungry for rebellion, Zeppelin wasn't entertainment, they were identity. Freeze the frame for a second. Look at them on stage. Plant shirtless, golden curls glowing under the lights. Page draped in a dragon suit, eyes half closed like he's summoning something only he can hear. Bonham, arms swinging like hammers. Jones, calm in the chaos, fingers walking the fretboard like clockwork. It wasn't an image cooked up by a label. It was instinct, 4 people embodying the sound they made. Raw, loud, unapologetic, quick reality check. By the early 70s, the youth culture that started with peace signs and flower power had curdled into something darker. Vietnam, oil crisis, street riots, the optimism of the 60s had worn off. Led Zeppelin stepped into that void, offering escape, not through politics, but through power. They gave their audience something to believe in, volume, sweat, and a kind of holy chaos. Their shows felt like mass gatherings of energy, rituals, not concerts. And that energy, that edge, scared people. Critics said it was too sexual, too pagan, too much. But the kids saw something pure. Four people completely alive. No rules, no apologies. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. They weren't reckless amateurs. They were craftsmen. Every scream, every riff, every drum fill, it was designed to hit with precision. Jimmy Page wasn't just a guitarist. He was an architect of sound. He used microphones like paintbrushes, placing them at odd angles and distances to create depth and space. One studio trick you can't unhear after this: listen to when the levee breaks. Those drums, they weren't recorded in a booth. They were captured in a stairwell, Bonham smashing his kit as the echo bounced off stone walls. That's why it sounds enormous, because it is enormous. Solo the drums. Hear what Bonham's doing under the vocal. It's not just keeping time, it's conversation. Every snare hit feels like punctuation. Every kick feels like punctuation to an unspoken argument between power and groove. He swung like a jazz player, hit like a street fighter. That's why copycats never quite felt right. They copied the hits, not the heartbeat. Now listen to the bass. John Paul Jones wasn't trying to show off. He was building foundations, sneaking melody into rhythm. His bass lines on Ramble On and The Ocean move like waves, constantly shifting but always carrying the song forward. He also brought in keyboards, mandolins, recorders, textures that turned Zeppelin's blues into something cinematic. Without him, the chaos would have collapsed. And Plant, his voice was an instrument of contrast, half preacher, half siren. He sang with no filter. He could whisper one line, then explode on the next, always chasing the edge between beauty and danger. His lyrics weren't just words, they were spells. He pulled from mythology, Tolkien, mystic poetry, turning hard rock into a kind of storytelling. That's how a song like Stairway to Heaven worked. It wasn't just about climbing a stairway. It was about chasing something you could never quite reach. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across America, stadiums were turning into temples. Zeppelin wasn't playing clubs anymore. They were filling football fields. In 1973, they set records for attendance and revenue, even outdrawing the Rolling Stones. Their live shows became legend. 3-hour marathons, feedback and smoke, guitar solos played with violin bows, Bonham's 20-minute drum wars. Fans described it like a spiritual experience. But underneath that spectacle, the band was tightening its grip on craft. Page mixed shows like a producer mixes records, shaping tone and volume for impact. Bonham locked into Jones with military precision. Even their improvisation was built on structure. Here's another thing you might not notice until you listen closely. Zeppelin had space. Most bands filled every second with noise, but they understood silence. Listen to Black Dog. After every riff, there's a split second of nothing, just breath, just tension. That pause makes the next riff hit harder. That's not accident, that's mastery. But with Myth came controversy. Rumors swirled, black magic, devil worship, hotel destruction, groupie scandals. Some true, most exaggerated, but they fed the fire. Page's fascination with occult symbolism, Aleister Crowley, runes, Zoso, made the band feel forbidden, almost dangerous. Parents banned their records, kids hid them under beds. The more society rejected them, the bigger they got. And yet strip all the myths away, and what's left is craft. Perfect, brutal craft. The swing of the hi-hat. The low hum of Jones's bass, the shimmer of Plant's voice, pull one piece out and the whole machine collapses. That balance of wild emotion and technical precision, that's what made Zeppelin untouchable. That's why decades later, their songs still sound alive. By 1975, they were untouchable kings of rock. 4 albums deep, each one rewriting what rock could be. They weren't chasing hits, they were building monuments. And for a moment, it looked like nothing could stop them. But behind that power, cracks were forming. Fame, exhaustion, indulgence, things that always follow success were starting to creep in. The storm they created was beginning to turn inward. In the next chapter, we step inside that storm when the noise around them became louder than the music itself.
This video is sponsored by the Lore Store on Amazon, your one-stop shop for music lovers across reggae, rock, pop, and hip-hop. We built it for real listeners who don't want to dig through 1,000 listings to find the right gear. Inside the Lore Store, you'll find 5 aisles. VIP, top, battle-tested essentials. Headphones, turntables, speakers, gig-safe earplugs, smart speakers. Reggae vibe, roots and lovers. Rock made easy, automatic decks, warm bookshelf speakers, vinyl care. Rock lore, classic rock must-haves, open back cans, simple amps, living room concert vibes. Pop lore, feel-good everyday setups, clean, clear speakers, easy streaming, nostalgia-friendly picks. Hip-hop must-haves, punchy bass without the muddle, closed-back headphones and living room systems that handle low-end, plus a rotating crate of old album vinyl if you're rebuilding a 60s-90s collection. Every product page tells you who it's for, 3 pros, 1 con, and why we picked it. So you can choose with confidence. Flying soon? Check. VIP for noise canceling that tames plane roar. Mostly listening at home? Try open-back headphones that let live albums breathe. Want instant gratification vinyl? Our fully automatic turntable is 1 button from silence to music, and the record cleaning kit knocks down crackle so the bass tightens up. Headed to shows? Grab high-fidelity earplugs, hands-free at home. Our smart speaker picks let you say, play 70s reggae or classic pop, and you're there. Deal alert! If you use the link in the description, you'll land on our curated picks with current best available Amazon pricing and active discounts where applicable. Prices change, so buy now to lock in today's deal. Tap the link in the description, pick your aisle, grab a favorite, and tell me which category you want me to build next. The Lore Store. Listen better, with gear that gets out of the way and lets the music live.
By 1975, Led Zeppelin stood on top of the world, but the air was getting thin up there. They had everything: money, fame, power, control. But behind the posters, there was a price tag: sleep, blood, sanity, years of relentless touring, nights that bled into mornings, and an expectation to outdo themselves every single time. They weren't just making music anymore. They were feeding a machine that never slept. Let's sit with this for a second. From 1969 to 1975, they'd played hundreds of shows across continents, often flying thousands of miles between gigs. When they weren't on stage, they were in studios or hotel rooms, writing, recording, surviving. The label wanted new albums. The fans wanted louder shows. The press wanted headlines. The grind became the lifestyle, and the lifestyle became the trap. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. Physical Graffiti came out in 1975, a masterpiece built on exhaustion. It was sprawling, brilliant, but you could hear the fatigue inside it, the sound of a band stretching every muscle just to keep going. It sold millions, of course, but the cost wasn't in sales. It was in the silence that came after the tour, when the adrenaline faded and reality hit. Page, the perfectionist, turned inward. Plant, the voice of thunder, started to feel the strain. His body, his mind, his family, and Bonham Bonzo was carrying a storm inside him that no applause could calm. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, rock itself was changing. Punk had exploded in London. Kids were wearing ripped shirts and safety pins, screaming that dinosaurs like Zeppelin had gone soft. Disco ruled the airwaves. The world was moving faster, and Zeppelin suddenly looked like kings from a fading empire, but they refused to retreat. They built bigger stages, bigger sets, bigger expectations. It was the only thing they knew how to do. Then came the turning point. In 1975, while vacationing in Rhodes, Greece, Robert Plant was in a car crash that shattered his ankle and nearly ended his life. The band's momentum stopped cold. Recording sessions were canceled, tours postponed. For the first time, the unstoppable force was standing still. They used the downtime to record presence, but the mood was different. Tight, urgent, paranoid. Plant was confined to a wheelchair during the sessions, singing about isolation and survival, and you can feel it in the record, songs that sound like they're fighting to stay alive. Here's the part fans don't put on t-shirts: the drugs, the drinking, the weight of success. By the late 70s, heroin and alcohol weren't backstage indulgences, they were survival tools. Page grew thinner, quieter. Bonham's drinking worsened. Even Peter Grant, their iron-willed manager, started losing control of the empire he'd built. Zeppelin wasn't four brothers anymore. They were four men in orbit, drifting further apart. In Through the Outdoor came in 1979, the last album they'd make together. It sounded different, lighter, more keyboard-driven, mostly steered by John Paul Jones, while the others battled fatigue and ghosts. Critics called it uneven, fans called it strange. But underneath it was a quiet sadness, a feeling that maybe the story was winding down. And then came 1980. The band prepared for another American tour, one more chance to prove they still ruled the world. Rehearsals took place in England, but Bonham wasn't the same. He was tired, drinking heavily, and haunted by the weight of the road ahead. On September 25, 1980, after a long day of rehearsals and too many drinks, John Bonham died in his sleep. He was 32. The shock was instant. There was no press statement, no dramatic farewell. The band simply announced, "Led Zeppelin cannot continue as we were." Most acts fade. Led Zeppelin didn't fade. They detonated. One moment they were gods, the next, gone. And maybe that's why the legend froze young instead of growing safe, because sometimes the only way for something that powerful to stay pure is to end before it softens. We're going to sit with this for a second. Imagine the silence after that final note, after the lights went out. A decade of thunder ended not with an encore, but with a single heartbeat stopping. The band that had turned rebellion into religion finally met its own human limit. But even in that silence, the echo didn't fade. Their music kept playing in garages, bedrooms, arenas, forever reminding people what happens when sound, soul, and danger collide. And in our final chapter, we'll explore that echo, the legacy that refused to die, and how the myth of Led Zeppelin became larger than the men who made it.
Hey, Rocklore community. Before we continue, let's have a real talk for a second, bro. You know, this isn't just a channel to us. And I hope it's not just a place you come to watch a video and then forget about it. This is a community. It's a place where we get to dig up the secrets of rock and roll, share our favorite riffs, and celebrate the artists who maybe didn't get the love they deserved. Right now, only about 1% of our viewers are subscribed. We can change that together and grow this community. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button with the notification bell on. When you do, you're not just helping a channel grow. You're becoming a member of the Rocklore family. You're signaling to us and to YouTube that these stories matter, that this music is worth preserving, and that this community is a place you want to be. Subscribing is your way of making sure you're always in the loop. It means you'll be the first to know when we unearth a forgotten legend, drop a new countdown, or dive into a piece of rock history you've never heard before. So if you're a true fan of the lore, if you get that same feeling of discovery that I do, then come join us. It takes 1 second to be a part of something bigger.
After the storm came the echo, and it's still ringing today. When Led Zeppelin ended in 1980, most bands would have vanished into nostalgia, but Zeppelin didn't fade. They evolved into something bigger than a group of musicians. They became a language every rock band still speaks. Before them, rock was raw but grounded. After them, it was mythic, unchained, cinematic. Even artists who've never heard Houses of the Holy are living inside its echo. Freeze that thought, because you can trace their DNA everywhere. Listen to the thunderous drums of Dave Grohl in Nirvana and Foo Fighters, that's Bonham's Ghost. Every guitarist who ever cranked a Les Paul through a Marshall stack is chasing Jimmy Page's tone. Every frontman who dares to howl instead of just sing owes a debt to Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones, often the quiet architect, left his fingerprint on generations of producers and arrangers, those who know that the secret weapon is not noise, but balance. Spot the lineage. Hear Jack White do the blues swagger, or Queens of the Stone Age play with the desert heaviness Zeppelin invented. You can hear it in hip-hop, too. The Beastie Boys, Eminem, and Dr. Dre all sampled Zeppelin riffs. Even trap producers borrow their dynamics. Soft verse, explosive drop. That's Zeppelin's blueprint: tension, release, then transcendence. But the legacy isn't just sound, it's attitude. They sold permission. Permission to make music your own way, to fuse styles, to take risks, to believe that something raw and handmade could fill stadiums. That freedom birthed hard rock, heavy metal, even alternative culture itself. The myth said, you can be loud, you can be strange, you can be gods for one night, and the afterlife of that myth is long. From 1980 onward, Zeppelin became the band every generation tries to rediscover. Tribute nights, reissues, documentaries, they never stop. The 2007 reunion at the O2 Arena reminded the world what they were capable of. One night only, but it was enough to prove that lightning can strike twice. Meanwhile, new fans find them through streaming playlists, old vinyls, or movie soundtracks. It's not nostalgia, it's discovery. Because Zeppelin doesn't feel old, they feel elemental. Quick energy shift. Why does it still hit in 2025? Because modern music is often built in grids, clean and perfect. Zeppelin wasn't. Their recordings breathe, they wobble, they bleed. Bonham's kick drum lags by a millisecond, and that's what makes it groove. Page's solos flirt with chaos, but land exactly where emotion tells them to. Plant's voice cracks just enough to remind you he's human, and Jones glues it all together like an engineer who understands magic. That imperfection is what we miss today. It's the human pulse inside the machine. One sample you've heard 1,000 times: when the levee breaks. Those drums, they've been used by everyone from Massive Attack to Beyonce to Eminem. Each time that echo reawakens the storm, it's proof that Zeppelin didn't just make music, they built sound itself into pop culture's architecture, and yet, beyond the riffs and the legend, their story remains human. Four men chasing a sound, trying to outrun time. They caught it for a while, then it caught them, but what remains is everything that matters: the feeling. The moment you first hear Kashmir in headphones, the slow rise of Stairway to Heaven until the world disappears, the thunder of Whole Lotta Love shaking a speaker, that's the heartbeat they left behind. If you were there, you already knew. If you weren't, now you do. Led Zeppelin changed the rules of what music could sound like, how it could feel, and how far it could reach. And their echo is the soundtrack of everything that came after. Your turn. What was the first Zeppelin song that hit you in the chest? Or the moment you realized a modern artist was carrying their flame? Drop it in the comments, and I'll build a fan-curated playlist of your picks. This is Bonham, Page, and Payne, where we keep the stories alive before the algorithm buries them. Subscribe so this history doesn't get erased. And hit the next episode, where we trace how Zeppelin's legacy shaped the birth of hard rock and the rise of bands who took their sound into the 80s and beyond. Because every legend leaves a map, and Zeppelin's, it still leads somewhere loud.